Think about the last time you learned something by just observing and connecting the dots. That's inductive thinking, and that's exactly why inductive teaching is one of my favorite methods. It enables learners to discover meaning, not just memorize concepts. Hi, I'm Peter Dominic, and this is your microlecture where we make lessons accessible, simple, and clear. Now let's simulate a classroom moment. I'll begin the lesson the way I would with my students with a quick thought spill. I'm going to ask them to read first the sentences, and after reading, I will ask them several questions. For example, what do these sentences have in common? What do you observe about how they are written? Some of you would respond that they all seem to give rules, advice, or instructions. And then I will build on that. So, another probing question: how would you describe the tone or mood of each sentence? Some might say they sound strict or serious, while others feel more like suggestions. And then I would nudge a bit further through another probing question: what helper words seem to change the tone or urgency of the sentence? So some of you would likely point out words like must, have to, should, and ought to. Without naming the topic just yet, we are already noticing something about how these words work, how they guide behavior, imply expectations, or offer recommendations. Now, every time they respond, I normally write the keywords of what I can get from their answers on the board, and then I would finally ask them, if you had to guess based on your answers, what do you think our lesson today is about? And then they would say that the topic is about modal verbs, words like must, should, and so on and so forth. And without defining anything for them yet, they already have some kind of feel for what these models do. So notice how from general questions with more open-ended questions than closed-ended questions, we are gradually unpacking our topic, and then I'm leading them to our topic without telling them directly. So that's from specific to general. Okay? And then you may also let them define what do we mean by modal verbs based on their prior knowledge, or say based on the context clues. This is inductive teaching in action, where learners observe, compare, infer, and construct knowledge. What you just did is the heart of inductive learning. You started by looking at the examples, and then you searched for patterns. From there, you guessed a rule, okay? Your mind tried to make sense of what you saw. And finally, you formed a concept even before I formally introduced it, right? So this process, observe plus compare, infer, construct, is equal to active learning. It shifts the focus from receiving information to building understanding, which leads to better retention and deeper thinking. So even though the task seemed simple, they were already building mental frameworks. That's why whenever you're writing a lesson plan or actually teaching, start by thinking, what's a good motivational activity I can use to ease learners into the topic? It doesn't always have to be elaborate. It can be as simple as a question that sparks curiosity, And personally, when I teach, I usually begin with an open ended question or a meaning making task, something like word associations, visual prompts, or just having learners predict ideas based on what they see on the screen or board. Once students start noticing connections or hinting at the topic, only then do I reveal the learning objectives. So it becomes more meaningful because the students feel like they arrived at the topic on their own. Okay? So there is no fixed formula for this. It all boils down to your creativity and how well you understand your learners. Let's formalize what just happened. Inductive teaching starts with observation, follows with reasoning, and ends in generalizations or conclusion. So that's from specific to general, okay, from noticing to knowing. So, for example, if you want to teach models or symbolism, you can start first with sample sentences or text, much like what we did earlier. Let the learners observe patterns. Or in literature, you can explore visual prompts like a photo or an excerpt for analysis. You, as the teacher, would ask probing questions. You may also play devil's advocate for more engagement and stimulate deeper thinking. Let's make this practical. Here's a quick 6-step guide you can follow to implement the inductive method in your own teaching. First, you will have to identify the concept that you're going to teach. What's the big idea or skill you want your students to uncover on their own? And then you will have to collect rich examples. These could be text, problems, or data. Anything that contains the clues to the concept you're targeting. Third, design a task to explore those examples. So give them something engaging to do with those examples. Group them, sort them, spot patterns, notice anomalies. So this is where the exploration begins. Fourth, pose open ended questions. So you will have to avoid questions answerable by yes or no, or even leading questions. Instead, ask things like, what do you notice? How are these different? What do these have in common? Fifth, let students generalize. Let them try forming their own definition or rule. It may not be perfect yet, okay? And that's totally fine. It shows ownership of learning. And then the last one, you have to confirm, clarify, and extend understanding. Now it's your turn to step in. Affirm accurate insights, clear up confusion, and expand their understanding. So this now bridges their discovery with academic precision. Okay? When you follow this process, you shift from being the giver of knowledge to being the guide who helps learners construct meaning. And that's when learning becomes real and lasting. Okay, let's take a moment to compare the difference between deductive and inductive teaching. Deductive teaching starts with rules or definition, followed by examples and practice. For instance, in grammar, you might say, today, class, we're learning about modals. Modals are helping verbs that express obligation, advice, or permission. And then you give examples after. So, for the advantage, well, it's quick and efficient. Perfect for procedures, formulas, or when time is limited. But the downside? Well, learners might memorize the rule without truly understanding it. It becomes surface level learning. Now, on the other hand, inductive teaching does the reverse. You begin with examples and then rules later. Okay? Again, you begin with examples without naming the concept yet. So, learners observe, compare, and eventually figure out the rules themselves. Okay? The benefit here is that it encourages critical thinking, curiosity, and deeper retention. And it makes students active participants in their own learning. The benefit here is that it encourages critical thinking, curiosity, and deeper retention. It makes students active participants in their own learning. The challenge, though, is that it takes more time. It also requires carefully chosen examples and good teacher questioning to guide the process effectively. So neither is right or wrong. It's about choosing the right method for your goals. If you want quick delivery of a rule, go deductive. But if you want students to discover ideas and remember them deeply, inductive is the way to go. So why go inductive? Well, it builds critical thinking. It encourages active learning. It promotes retention and understanding. And it makes learners independent discoverers. Now, let's be honest. It's not always easy. Inductive teaching takes time because you're letting students do the thinking. You need good examples that highlight the pattern clearly, scaffolding to support students without spoon feeding, and of course, strong questioning to steer their thinking in the right direction. But here's the good news. With practice, you'll get better at balancing things, knowing when to guide, when to hold back, and when to clarify. Now, to conclude, inductive teaching is a powerful method grounded in how people learn through experience, pattern recognition, and meaning making. Next time you teach a new concept, try flipping the script. Start with examples. Let students observe, ask open-ended questions, and then guide them toward their own discoveries. That's when learning sticks. Now, here's your challenge. Think of a topic you usually teach deductively. How could you transform it into an inductive lesson? What examples would you use? What questions would you ask to lead learners to the concept? So drop your answer in the comment section below. Let's talk about how you can be able to use inductive teaching effectively.